Before anything happens, before the day remembers what it is supposed to become, there is this moment. You are here, listening, breathing, resting somewhere between waking and sleep. Nothing is required of you yet. No decision, no effort, no understanding. Just the quiet awareness that you are alive and that this breath is already happening without your help. This is not the kind of history that moves through battles, dates, or loud turning points. This is a life shaped in the soft spaces most people overlook. A life where change arrives slowly, like light creeping across a floor, and meaning gathers not through force, but through attention. You are not being told a story tonight. You are stepping into one, gently, as if the door were already open and waiting for you to notice. As you listen, you may feel the pace begin to loosen. Thoughts may drift, then return. That is fine. Nothing important will be missed. This life unfolds the way breathing unfolds, steady, unannounced, complete in each moment. The person you are about to live as does not begin with certainty or ambition. He begins with awareness, with noticing, with the simple understanding that being present is enough. You are not entering this story at a dramatic moment. There is no crisis here, no sharp beginning. Instead, there is mist resting over the land, air cool against the skin, and a world that has not yet decided to hurry. The lessons you will encounter are not delivered as rules. They arrive through walking, sitting, listening, and learning how to stay with what is already here. For the next while, you don't need to stay awake for this history. Let it move around you. Let it carry you. If your body grows heavy, allow it. If your thoughts soften, let them fade. This story understands that rest is not an interruption. It is part of the experience. Everything begins quietly, not with words, not with purpose, but with a breath. And as the night loosens its hold and morning waits patiently nearby, you awaken before the sun has fully decided to rise. You awaken before the sun has fully decided to rise, at a moment when night and morning still share the land without argument. The air around you is cool and slightly damp, carrying the scent of wet earth, distant water, and leaves that have rested through the dark. Mist hangs low among the trees, not drifting so much as waiting, and everything feels softened by it. There's no sudden sound to pull you awake. Instead, awareness arrives gently, like a hand placed lightly on your shoulder. You lie still, listening. Somewhere far off, a bird calls once and then stops, as if testing whether the day is ready. Your chest rises and falls, and you notice your breath before you notice your thoughts. It moves slowly, naturally, without effort. In this quiet corner of central Vietnam, your life does not begin with ambition or urgency. It begins with breathing. You are young, though you do not think of yourself that way yet. Age is not something you measure. Time is simply a flow you move within. The small house around you is simple, built from wood that has aged into smoothness, its surfaces worn by many hands and many seasons. Light has not yet reached the floor, but it presses gently against the walls, promising its arrival. You can feel the woven mat beneath you, its fibers slightly rough, familiar against your skin. Outside, the land breathes with you. Dew clings to grass and low plants, gathering at their edges until it grows heavy enough to fall back to the soil. This cycle feels natural, unquestioned. You do not yet have words for impermanence, but you live inside it already. As you rise, you move quietly, not because someone has told you to be silent, but because silence feels appropriate here. Each step seems to belong to the moment it is taken. You open the door and step outside, where the mist brushes against your face like a cool cloth. The world is still muted, its colors pale and blurred, greens and browns softened into one another. Trees stand patiently, their outlines barely defined, as if they are still deciding how solid they wish to be. You breathe in again, deeper this time, and notice how the air fills your body before leaving it. It feels steady, reliable. No one has taught you to observe it, yet something inside you already understands that this simple rhythm is important. Nearby, water moves slowly through a narrow channel, its surface disturbed only by the occasional ripple. The sound is quiet but constant, a low murmur that blends into the background of your awareness. You squat near it, dipping your fingers into the cool flow. The sensation is sharp at first, then calming, grounding. Mud presses softly beneath your feet, yielding without resistance. You watch as the water continues on, unconcerned with where it has been or where it is going. This does not strike you as a lesson yet. It is simply the way things are. But something settles in you as you watch, a sense that movement does not always require force. Morning slowly gathers itself. Shapes become clearer. The outlines of plants sharpen, and the trees emerge from the mist one by one. Smoke begins to rise from distant homes, thin and grey, carrying the smell of cooking rice and burning wood. These scents drift across the land without urgency, arriving when they arrive. You feel hunger, but it is gentle, not demanding. Your body seems to understand that it will be fed, that there is no need to rush. You stretch, feeling the small pulls and releases of muscle and bone, aware of yourself as something both solid and changing. Voices begin to appear in the distance, low and unhurried. People greet the morning the way they greet one another here, without excess. Life unfolds through routine rather than surprise. You watch elders move with practiced care, their gestures economical, shaped by years of repetition. You do not yet know that you are watching a kind of wisdom. You simply see that their movements are calm, that nothing seems wasted. Tools are lifted, baskets carried, doors opened. Each action fits neatly into the space it occupies. You are drawn to quiet places. Even now, you linger at the edge of activity rather than stepping fully into it. There is comfort in observation. You notice small things others pass by. The way light catches on the surface of a leaf, the sound of sandals against packed earth, the brief pause someone takes before speaking. These moments do not announce themselves as important, yet they gather in you, forming a kind of inner landscape. You feel at ease within it, though you cannot explain why. As the sun finally lifts itself above the horizon, warmth begins to replace the coolness of night. The mist thins, rising slowly until it disappears into the brighter air. With it goes the sense of separation between sky and land. Everything feels connected now, joined by light. You sit again, letting the warmth settle on your skin. Your breathing remains steady, unchanged by the shifting morning. Inhale, exhale. Each breath feels complete in itself. You do not feel the need to add anything to it. There is no sense yet of the long path ahead, of temples and teachings, of words that will one day travel far beyond this place. None of that presses into this moment. Your world is small and contained, shaped by fields, water, and the quiet presence of others. Yet within this simplicity, something deep is forming. Attention, though unnamed, is already taking root. You are learning, without instruction, how to be with what is in front of you. The way you stand, the way you sit, the way you breathe. These are not preparations for a future life. They are the life itself, unfolding gently, breath by breath, at the edge of morning. The days begin to settle into one another, not stacked or counted, but flowing together like water, moving through shallow earth. Morning light becomes familiar, and so does the way the air cools again when evening arrives. You grow within these repeating rhythms, shaped quietly by them. Childhood does not announce itself as a separate season of life. It simply unfolds, steady and unremarkable, marked by the sounds that return each day. Insects begin their chorus as the sun lowers, their buzzing and clicking, forming a soft veil over the land. You hear them before you think about them, and long before you try to name them. Their presence fills the spaces between thoughts, teaching you that silence is not the absence of sound, but something broader, something that can hold many small noises without disturbance. You spend much of your time moving through a small courtyard, enclosed but open to the sky. The ground beneath your feet is packed earth, cool in the morning, warm by afternoon. Stones edge the space unevenly, placed there long before you were born, smoothed by weather and footsteps. Plants grow where they are allowed, vines creeping along walls, leaves stretching outward without urgency. You trace familiar paths across this ground, sometimes slowly, sometimes without direction at all. There is no expectation placed on your movement. You walk because walking feels natural, because the body asks for it. When you stop, it is not because you are told to, but because stillness draws you in. The courtyard becomes a place where time behaves differently. Hours pass without being noticed. You sit with your back against the wall, feeling its roughness through your clothing, and watch shadows shift as the sun moves. The shapes lengthen and shorten, slipping quietly across the ground. You do not think of this as change. It is simply how the day breathes. Nearby, an elder may sweep fallen leaves, the sound of straw against earth repeating in a slow, patient rhythm. Each stroke is deliberate, unhurried. You watch without comment, sensing that this task matters, even if you do not yet know why. At dusk, the air thickens with sound. Crickets call from hidden places. Frogs add their low voices. And somewhere beyond the courtyard, a bird settles in for the night. These sounds do not compete with one another. They exist side by side, layered gently. You sit quietly and let them arrive. There is no effort involved. Listening happens on its own, Words are still limited for you, and you do not feel their absence. Meaning comes through sensation instead. The cooling air on your skin, the faint smell of smoke from cooking fires, the way the sky deepens from pale blue to something darker and softer. You learn to rest inside these moments, though you would not yet describe it as learning. Meals are simple, shared without ceremony. Bowls are filled and emptied. Hands move with familiarity. You notice the texture of rice, the warmth rising from it, the way hunger fades gradually rather than all at once. Eating becomes another quiet activity, neither rushed nor delayed. Conversation happens around you, but you're more aware of tone than content. Voices rise and fall gently, shaped by the same patience that guides every other part of the day. You absorb this without effort. It settles into you, becoming part of how you understand the world. Silence begins to feel like a companion rather than an absence. You discover that you are comfortable within it, that it does not need to be filled. When you are alone, you do not reach outward for distraction. You sit, you stand, you watch. Thoughts come and go, though you do not yet notice them clearly. They pass like clouds that do not demand attention. Your breath remains steady, even when your body moves. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm stays with you, unnoticed but constant. The land itself seems to guide you. Fields stretch outward beyond the courtyard, their surfaces shifting with seasons you feel more than understand. During wetter days, the smell of earth grows rich and heavy. During dry ones, dust clings lightly to your feet. You learn these changes through your body, rather than through explanation. Feet grow used to uneven ground, hands to the feel of plants and tools. You learn patience by watching crops grow, by seeing how nothing can be forced to arrive sooner than it is ready. This lesson settles deep, unspoken, becoming part of how you meet everything else. There are moments when you lie awake at night, listening to the sounds that continue, even after human voices fade. Insects persist, wind moves through leaves, and somewhere water continues its quiet journey. Darkness does not feel empty. It feels full, layered with presence. You breathe slowly, matching the pace of the night. Sleep comes without struggle, not because you seek it, but because you allow yourself to sink into the rhythm already carrying you. Childhood passes not as something lost, but as something absorbed. These days of small movements and quiet observation do not disappear. They gather inside you, shaping the way you stand, the way you listen, the way you pause before acting. You are learning silence long before you learn how to speak about it. You are learning patience without being told it is a virtue. The courtyard, the insects, the steady turning of day into night all teach you gently, without instruction. And you move forward within this calm, unaware that these simple rhythms are laying the foundation for a life that will always return again and again to stillness. The quiet that has shaped you does not disappear as your path narrows and turns inward. It simply deepens. One morning, without ceremony, you find yourself standing before the temple gates. They are not grand in the way stories sometimes promise. The wood is weathered, darkened by years of rain and sun, and the threshold shows the subtle curve of countless feet that have crossed before yours. You pause there, not out of hesitation, but because something in you recognizes the weight of the moment. The air feels cooler on this side of the walls, shaded by tall trees whose leaves stir gently above. When you step forward, your bare feet meet stone, and the chill rises slowly through your body, grounding you in the present. The sound it makes is soft, a dull contact that feels intentional, as if the floor itself is asking for awareness. Inside, the space opens quietly. Courtyards give way to corridors, and corridors lead to rooms that hold little more than what is needed. Light filters in through narrow openings, resting on surfaces rather than flooding them. Shadows linger, unmoving, until the sun shifts enough to guide them elsewhere. You notice how the air smells faintly of incense and old wood, a scent that does not overwhelm but stays close, like a reminder. No one rushes past you. Movements here are measured, deliberate. Even the smallest gesture seems to carry weight, as though it has been practiced many times before finding its final shape. A bell sounds somewhere deeper within the temple. It is not loud, not sharp. The tone spreads outward slowly, touching walls, floors, and bodies before fading back into silence. You feel it more than you hear it, a vibration that settles in your chest and then dissolves. Time begins to reveal itself differently here. It is no longer marked by hunger or daylight alone, but by these gentle signals that arrive without demand. When the bell fades, no one speaks immediately. Silence holds, unbroken, and you sense that this pause matters as much as the sound itself. Your days begin to take on a new shape. Mornings arrive early, guided by the cool air that slips through sleeping quarters before dawn. You rise with others, folding blankets carefully, smoothing the fabric with hands that are learning precision. Each movement is slow, not from reluctance, but from attention. Stone floors greet your feet again, familiar now, still cool, still steady. You walk in lines that feel almost ceremonial, though no one has explained them as such. The rhythm of footsteps becomes another form of listening. Inhale as the foot lifts. Exhale as it rests. Without instruction, breath and movements begin to align. Work fills the hours without crowding them. You sweep leaves from paths already swept the day before. You carry water, tend small gardens, wipe dust from surfaces that will gather it again. At first, part of you wonders about the purpose of repetition. Then, gradually, the question fades. The act itself becomes sufficient. Each task invites you to be fully present, to notice the texture of the broom handle, the sound of bristles against stone, the way sunlight shifts as you move. Nothing asks to be finished quickly. Completion is not the goal. Care is. Meals are taken in silence. Bowls are held with both hands, lifted and set down with quiet respect. You become aware of the sound food makes when it touches the bowl, of the warmth rising into your palms. Eating slows. You chew more deliberately, noticing taste and texture in ways you never did before. Hunger softens gradually, and with it comes a subtle gratitude. not directed toward anyone in particular, but toward the moment itself. When the meal ends, the bell sounds again, and everyone rises together, moving as one body composed of many. Teaching here does not arrive as explanation. It comes through posture, through the way elders sit without shifting, through how they bow before entering a room. You watch closely, not out of pressure to imitate, but because observation feels natural. You notice how they pause before speaking, how words emerge only when needed. Often, they do not speak at all. Their presence carries instruction. You feel yourself learning humility, not as a concept, but as a physical sensation, a settling of the body into its place. Evenings return you to quiet reflection. Lamps cast soft pools of light that do not reach the corners of the room. You sit on the floor, legs folded, spine upright, but not strained. At first, your thoughts wander easily, drifting back to familiar images from before the gates. Gradually, they begin to slow. You are not forcing them away. You are simply noticing their movement, the way they rise and fall like breath. The bell sounds once more, low and steady, and you let its echo guide you back to stillness. As days turn into weeks, the temple ceases to feel like a separate world. Its rhythms merge with those already living inside you. The patience learned in fields and courtyards now finds a deeper expression here. Silence becomes more spacious. Discipline does not feel restrictive. It feels supportive, like a structure that allows calm to remain undisturbed. You are not becoming someone else. You are shedding what is unnecessary layer by layer, guided by cool stone, gentle bells, and the steady reminder of your own breathing. Time inside the temple begins to stretch, not outward, but inward. Hours no longer feel like something you move through on your way to somewhere else. They become spaces you inhabit fully. You find yourself sitting more often now, guided not by instruction, shouted or written, but by the quiet example of others who lower themselves to the floor as naturally as breathing. The cushion beneath you is thin, offering no indulgence, and the stone below it holds a steady coolness that rises slowly into your legs. You arrange your body carefully, adjusting the way your knees meet the ground, how your spine stacks itself upward. There is no rush to be comfortable. Comfort, you are learning, is not the absence of sensation, but the ability to remain with it. At first, stillness feels unfamiliar in this new way. Your body settles, but your mind continues to move, carrying fragments of sound, memory, and anticipation. Thoughts drift through like visitors who have not been told how long they may stay. You notice them without judgment, though that noticing itself feels awkward at first, like using a new muscle. The bell rings to mark the beginning of sitting, its tone spreading gently through the hall, and you allow the sound to fade completely before turning your attention inward. Breath becomes an anchor, though you do not cling to it. Air enters, cool at the nose, warmer as it leaves. The rise and fall of your chest is subtle but steady, a quiet reassurance that something within you knows how to continue without instruction. Restlessness appears slowly. It does not arrive as agitation so much as suggestion. a small discomfort in the knee, an itch along the arm, a thought that wonders how much time has passed. You feel these things clearly. What surprises you is that nothing happens when you do not immediately respond. The itch softens, the discomfort shifts, then settles. The thought drifts away, replaced by another, and then another. You begin to see that restlessness feeds on reaction. When you watch it without feeding it, it loses its urgency. This realization does not come as a sharp insight. It unfolds gradually, like dawn light spreading across the floor. The hall around you remains quiet. Others sit nearby, their presence felt more than seen. You hear the faint sound of fabric moving as someone adjusts their posture, the subtle creak of wood as the building responds to temperature and time. These sounds do not pull you away. They become part of the field of awareness, no more disruptive than breath itself. You are learning that stillness does not require silence, only attention. Even movement, when noticed gently, belongs. As the sitting continues, your sense of self begins to loosen. You are no longer focused on holding a particular posture or achieving a particular state. Sitting becomes something that happens rather than something you do. The body breathes, sensations rise and fall, thoughts appear and disappear. You remain present for all of it, not standing apart, not trying to control. This presence feels spacious, though you would not yet call it that. It feels like room to rest. Time becomes difficult to measure here. Without clocks or conversation, minutes lose their edges. The bell eventually sounds again, marking the end of the sitting, but it feels less like an interruption and more like a gentle return. You bow, rising slowly, aware of how blood moves back into your legs, how balance returns step by step. There is no triumph in standing, no sense of having completed something important. There is simply continuity. Sitting does not end when you stand. It follows you into movement. You carry this awareness into daily tasks. Sweeping becomes a form of sitting in motion. Washing bowls, carrying water, folding robes. All are done with the same quiet attention you found on the cushion. When restlessness appears now, you recognize it more easily. It no longer feels like an enemy to be pushed away. It is simply another experience to observe. Sometimes it lingers, sometimes it dissolves quickly. Either way, you remain. Evenings offer another opportunity to sit. Lamps glow softly, their light steady and warm. You return to the cushion, lowering yourself with familiarity rather than effort. Your body remembers now. It knows how to arrange itself without struggle. The breath feels closer, more intimate. Thoughts still come, but they carry less weight. You are not trying to empty the mind. You are learning to give it space. What slowly becomes clear is that stillness is not something imposed from outside. It grows from patience, from repeated willingness to remain where you are. You're not forcing yourself into calm. You are allowing calm to emerge when it is ready. This understanding does not settle all at once. It seeps in quietly, the way moisture settles into wood over time. By the time night deepens and the temple grows even quieter, sitting feels less like a practice and more like a way of being. You lie down later with the same attention, feeling the mat beneath you, the air against your skin. Breath continues its gentle rhythm. The day does not end sharply. It softens, dissolving into rest. And within that rest, something steady remains. A stillness you did not create, but learn to notice by sitting with yourself, patiently, again and again. Life within the temple settles into a rhythm so gentle that it almost disappears. Days no longer stand apart from one another, and even the distinction between morning and evening feels less pronounced. What guides you now are small sounds and subtle movements. A bell rings somewhere beyond the trees, its tone round and patient, drifting through open spaces before dissolving into air. You pause when you hear it, not because you must, but because your body has learned to listen. The sound does not command attention. It invites it. You notice how it lingers for a moment after it fades, as if silence itself has been shaped by its passing. Your breath naturally slows, meeting that quiet space without effort. You move through daily tasks with an ease that surprises you. Sweeping the paths in the early light, you feel the weight of the broom balanced in your hands. Each stroke gathers fallen leaves that have arrived overnight, their edges curled, their colors muted by dust and dew. The sound they make as they slide across stone is soft and dry, a gentle whisper that repeats with every movement. You do not hurry to clear the path. There is no sense that it must be finished quickly. The act of sweeping feels complete in each moment, whether the path is clean or not. Leaves fall again as you work, loosened by a passing breeze. You notice this without frustration. Falling and clearing belong together. Folding robes becomes another quiet ritual. The fabric is worn smooth, shaped by countless hands before yours. You lift it carefully, feeling its weight, its warmth, the way it yields easily to familiar movements. Creases are made slowly, deliberately, not to achieve perfection, but to honor the act itself. As you fold, your attention rests fully on the texture beneath your fingers. Thoughts drift by, but they no longer demand engagement. They pass like the clouds you sometimes watch from the courtyard, moving at their own pace, unconcerned with where they are going. You remain where you are, present with cloth and breath. The bells continue to mark the day, appearing at intervals that feel natural rather than imposed. One calls you to gather, another to pause, another to release what you are doing and move on. Each bell sounds slightly different depending on where you stand. Sometimes it arrives clear and full, other times softened by distance, filtered through leaves and branches. You learn that listening changes with location. That sound is never fixed. This awareness extends beyond bells. You begin to notice how footsteps sound different on stone than on earth, how voices soften when carried across open space, how wind shifts its tone as it moves through trees. Leaves become quiet teachers. You watch them fall without ceremony, detaching themselves when the time feels right. They spin briefly in the air, then settle where they land. No leaf seems concerned with where it will rest. You see them gathered by wind, scattered again, pressed flat by rain, lifted once more by drying air. As you sweep them into piles, you feel no sense of finality. Tomorrow, more will fall. This repetition does not feel futile. It feels steady, dependable. You begin to understand that constancy does not mean sameness. Each leaf is different. Each fall is unique, even as the pattern repeats. Walking between buildings, you feel the ground change beneath your feet. Stone gives way to packed earth, earth to gravel. Each surface asks for a slightly different step, a small adjustment of balance. You find yourself walking more slowly, not because you are tired, but because speed feels unnecessary. With each step, you feel the contact clearly, heel, then sole, then toes. Breath moves in rhythm with your pace. Inhale, exhale. Movement and stillness no longer feel separate. Even when your body is active, there is a quiet center that remains unmoved. At times, you pause beneath trees where the canopy filters sunlight into shifting patterns. Light flickers across the ground, never staying in one place for long. You watch it move without trying to follow it. Somewhere above, leaves brush against one another, producing a sound so soft it barely registers. You stand there longer than you intend, simply because there is no reason to leave. Presence has become its own reason. As evening approaches, the pace of the temple softens further. Tasks are completed without announcement. People drift quietly to where they need to be. The air cools, carrying with it the scent of earth and wood smoke. Another bell sounds, slower now, its tone deep and grounding. You listen as it fades into the gathering dusk. The sound seems to settle into your chest before disappearing entirely. You feel the day gather itself, not ending abruptly, but easing into rest. When night finally settles, you realize that nothing remarkable has happened. No great event marks the passage of time, and yet something within you has shifted. These small rituals, repeated without urgency, have shaped the way you meet each moment. Sweeping, folding, listening, walking. None of them stand apart as special. Together, they form a life lived with attention. You lie down later, feeling the quiet weight of the day, the echo of bells still faintly present in your awareness. Leaves will fall again tomorrow. Bells will sound. You will listen. And in this simple continuity, presence continues to deepen, gently, without effort. The quiet that has settled into your days does not thin when you enter the small study rooms tucked along the inner corridors of the temple. It deepens there, held carefully by walls that have absorbed centuries of breath and thought. Light arrives reluctantly, slipping through narrow openings and resting in pale rectangles on the floor. You sit near one of these patches, where the glow is just strong enough to soften the darkness without chasing it away. Before you, wooden shelves hold stacks of bound texts, their covers worn smooth, their edges darkened by many hands. The room smells faintly of dust, ink, and old paper, a scent that feels steady and reassuring, like something that has no need to prove itself. You open the book slowly, aware of the sound it makes as the cover lifts, a soft resistance followed by release. The pages are thin and slightly uneven, bearing marks of age that no longer feel fragile. Ink lines the surface in careful strokes, characters shaped by patience rather than speed. You do not rush to read. Your eyes follow the lines gently, letting each symbol arrive fully before moving on. The meaning does not always come immediately. Sometimes it pauses, hovering just beyond understanding. You remain with it anyway, noticing how your breath stays calm even when comprehension feels incomplete. There is no pressure to master what is in front of you. Learning here does not resemble accumulation. It feels more like listening. As you read, the world outside the room continues quietly. You hear distant footsteps, the low murmur of voices passing and fading, the occasional bell drifting through the trees. None of this pulls you away. It settles around you, forming a soft backdrop against which words rise and fall. When your eyes tire, you pause, letting them rest on the empty space between lines. Thoughts appear, shaped by what you have read, then dissolve again. You notice how easily the mind moves when it is not pushed. Reading becomes another way of sitting, another way of being still while something unfolds. Ink stains your fingers faintly as you copy passages by hand. The brush feels balanced between your fingers, its tip responsive to pressure and angle. You dip it carefully, watching excess ink gather and then release. Each stroke demands attention. There is no room for haste. When your hand wavers, the line records it without judgment. You accept this, adjusting slowly. Copying is not about producing something flawless. It is about entering the rhythm of the text, letting its pace guide your own. As characters take shape beneath your hand, you feel connected to those who traced them before you, separated by time but joined through movement. The ideas contained in these texts do not rush toward you. They arrive gradually, revealing themselves in layers. Teachings on impermanence, compassion, interbeing. They do not announce their importance. They sit quietly on the page, waiting for your readiness. Some days, a single line stays with you long after you close the book. Other days, words pass through without leaving a clear impression. Both feel acceptable. You are learning that understanding cannot be forced, that it ripens when conditions are right. As the hours pass, light shifts across the room. Shadows lengthen, then soften. You notice the subtle change in temperature as evening approaches. You close the book gently, placing it back where it belongs. There is no sense of interruption. Study does not end when the book closes. The ideas continue to echo softly as you rise, as you walk, as you breathe. They blend with the lessons already learned through sweeping paths and listening to bells. Knowledge does not stand apart from daily life. It moves through it, quietly shaping the way you see. Later, sitting alone, you reflect without effort. Words from the text surface and settle into your awareness, not as concepts to be analyzed, but as perspectives that widen the space within you. The world feels slightly larger, not because it has changed, but because your way of meeting it has. You feel no urge to speak about this expansion. It remains internal, steady, unfolding at its own pace. When night deepens and lamps are lit, you return briefly to the written page. The dim light softens the characters, blurring their edges just enough to slow your reading further. This feels appropriate. You move line by line, breath by breath. There is no separation now between meditation and study. Both ask the same thing of you: presence, patience, openness. You remain seated, feeling the quiet weight of the book in your hands, the steady rhythm of your breathing, the gentle widening of your inner horizon. The calm you have cultivated does not remain confined to stone corridors and shaded courtyards. It settles into you so completely that, when the moment arrives to step beyond the familiar grounds, there is no sharp sense of departure. You walk through the gates without ceremony, feeling the change not as loss, but as a widening. The air outside carries different sounds now. The distant murmur of voices layered together, the uneven rhythm of footsteps on roads worn by trade and travel, the occasional creak of carts moving slowly underweight. Your feet meet earth that feels less sheltered, more exposed to sun and rain, yet no less steady. You breathe in, and the breath feels the same. That steadiness becomes your quiet companion as the path unfolds ahead. Villages appear along the way, shaped by daily necessity rather than contemplation. Homes cluster close together, walls marked by smoke and weather. You pass people whose lives move at a different tempo, shaped by harvests, markets, and family obligations. Some glance at you briefly, others offer small nods, gestures that carry neither suspicion nor curiosity, simply acknowledgement. You notice how easily the mind begins to label these encounters, how quickly stories try to form. Instead of following them, you return to the sensation of walking, the subtle shift of balance with each step. The calm you carry does not separate you from others. It allows you to meet them without hurry, without the need to arrive anywhere else. When you stop to speak, conversations unfold simply. Words are exchanged about water levels, about crops, about the passing of seasons. You listen more than you speak, letting pauses settle naturally rather than filling them. People seem to respond to this quiet attention, speaking a little more slowly, a little more openly. You sense how listening itself can be a form of service, how being fully present eases something unseen. Responsibilities emerge gently from these encounters. You are asked to teach, to offer guidance, to help organize small gatherings where people sit together and breathe. None of this feels heavy. It feels like an extension of what you have already been doing, simply practiced in a different setting. The rhythm of your days adjusts without resistance. Mornings may begin in unfamiliar rooms, light filtering through different shapes of windows, carrying new smells of cooking fires and damp earth. You wake with the same attention you learned before, noticing breath, noticing the body before rising. Evenings end with unfamiliar sounds, dogs settling, voices fading into the night, insects beginning their steady chorus. You sit quietly wherever you are, letting the day soften. The absence of temple bells does not leave a gap. Other sounds take their place, each capable of guiding awareness when met with care. Travel itself becomes a teacher. Paths wind through fields and along waterways, sometimes clear, sometimes uneven. You learn to adjust your pace to the land, slowing when the ground demands it, pausing when the heat grows heavy. There is no sense of pushing through discomfort. You respond, adapt, continue. Along the way, you notice how the mind reacts to uncertainty, how it reaches for familiarity. Each time, you return gently to breath, to the simple fact of being here. This return becomes second nature, a quiet gesture repeated without effort. As you move among wider society, you encounter suffering more directly. Worry lines faces, voices carry fatigue. Lives are shaped by forces beyond individual control. You do not turn away, nor do you absorb it as your own. Instead, you practice being present with what is offered, holding it with the same steadiness you once gave to sweeping leaves or tracing ink on paper. Compassion arises not as a response you manufacture, but as something that flows naturally from attention. You realize that calm is not withdrawal. It is engagement without entanglement. At night, when you rest beneath unfamiliar roofs or open skies, memories of the temple surface quietly. Stone floors, filtered light, the sound of bells echoing through trees. These images do not pull you backward. They remind you that what mattered there was never the place itself. It was the way of being you learned within it. Now, that way moves with you, shaping how you walk, how you speak, how you pause. The monastery walls no longer define the boundaries of your practice. They have dissolved into the wider world, and you continue forward, carrying calm, not as something fragile to protect, but as something durable enough to share. The land begins to speak to you in quieter, heavier ways as you move deeper into it. Roads that once felt merely worn now carry traces of hesitation. Villages seem to breathe differently, their rhythms slightly uneven, as if something unseen presses gently but constantly against them. You notice it first in the pauses between conversations, in the way people glance down paths before speaking, in how evenings settle earlier than they used to. The air still smells of earth and cooking fires, still carries the familiar chorus of insects at dusk, yet beneath it all runs a low current of uncertainty. You walk through these places without announcing yourself, allowing your presence to remain light. Each step feels deliberate, not cautious, but attentive. Homes appear much the same as those you have always known, built from wood and stone shaped by weather and time. It's something in their stillness feels different. Doors are closed more often. Voices lower when strangers pass. You sit with families on woven mats, sharing simple meals, and feel the quiet weight that hangs just behind ordinary words. When they speak of crops or water, there is an undercurrent of concern, a sense that familiar patterns can no longer be fully trusted. You listen without interruption, without trying to ease what does not ask to be eased. Your breath remains steady as you hear their stories, grounding you in the present moment so that their pain does not overwhelm you. Children still play, their laughter brief but genuine, rising and falling like birds startled into flight. You watch them run along paths that curve between houses, their feet kicking up dust that hangs briefly in the air before settling again. Even here, life continues to assert itself quietly. You notice how easily joy and sorrow exist side by side, neither cancelling the other. This understanding settles in your body rather than your thoughts. It allows you to witness suffering without turning away and without being pulled under by it. You feel how attention itself can be a form of refuge. At night, when you sit alone or with small groups, the darkness feels thicker, more enclosing. Lamps cast smaller pools of light, and shadows press closer to their edges. The sounds of the night seem sharper now, each rustle or distant call carrying more weight. You sit with others in silence, breathing together, letting the shared stillness create a sense of safety that words cannot. There is no attempt to deny what is happening around you. Instead, you remain rooted in what is happening within you, the rise and fall of breath, the contact of your body with the ground, the quiet awareness that holds everything gently. Travel between villages reveals signs of strain etched into the land itself. Fields lie partially tended, their growth uneven. Waterways run lower than before, or faster, depending on the season, as if responding to pressures beyond their usual cycles. You walk these paths slowly, noticing how your own body responds to what you see. Tightness arises, a subtle contraction in the chest or shoulders. You recognize it, soften around it, allow it to pass. Holding pain with care, you are learning, does not mean carrying it endlessly. It means letting it be felt without resistance, without clinging. People begin to ask you questions that have no easy answers. They speak of fear, of loss, of a future that feels less certain than the past. You do not offer solutions. You offer presence. Sitting with them, you breathe calmly, allowing space for their words to settle. Sometimes, you guide them gently back to their own breathing, to the simple fact of being alive in this moment. You see how even brief moments of stillness can loosen the grip of worry, if only slightly. This small easing matters. It does not erase suffering, but it makes room around it. Your nights are often restless now, not from fear, but from the weight of what you have witnessed. Lying down beneath unfamiliar roofs or open skies, you listen to the sounds of the village settling into uneasy sleep. Dogs bark and then fall silent. A distant voice calls out, then fades. You bring your attention back to breath again and again, letting it anchor you when thoughts begin to circle. You remember how stillness once felt sheltered within temple walls. Now, it feels more exposed, yet also more necessary. You learn that calm does not mean insulation from pain. It means the ability to remain open without breaking. As days pass, you notice a quiet resilience in the people you meet. Despite uncertainty, they continue to cook, to clean, to care for one another in small, practical ways. You watch hands working together, mending nets, preparing food, rebuilding what has been damaged. These actions carry a dignity that does not seek recognition. You feel gratitude for being allowed to witness this strength. It reminds you that suffering and endurance are intertwined, each shaping the other. When you leave a village, you do so quietly, carrying its presence with you without letting it weigh you down. The path ahead stretches on, marked by dust and light. By the steady rhythm of your steps, you move forward with care, holding what you have seen in a spacious awareness. Pain remains real, undeniable, yet it no longer demands that you harden against it. You have learned to walk with it gently, to let compassion flow without exhaustion. The country around you continues to shift, unsettled and uncertain, and you continue through it, breathing steadily, offering calm not as an answer, but as a way of staying present amid quiet turmoil. Your presence among the people begins to change almost without notice, not because you announce anything new, but because you move differently. You walk more slowly than most, not out of caution, but out of attention. Your steps land fully, heel to earth, earth to soul, as if each one matters on its own. Others begin to notice this before they notice you. They fall into step beside you, unconsciously matching your pace. Conversations soften, voices lower. You do not speak of peace as an idea. You embody it as a rhythm, something that can be felt rather than explained. In villages shaped by uncertainty, this steadiness feels unfamiliar at first, then quietly reassuring. When people gather around you, it is rarely formal. Someone invites you to sit beneath a tree while the afternoon light fades. Another asks you to share a meal. You accept without ceremony, settling onto woven mats or bare ground, wherever there is space. You listen more than you speak. When words do come, they are simple, grounded in the body rather than the mind. You invite attention to breath, not as a technique, but as something already happening. You suggest noticing the feeling of air entering the nose, the gentle expansion of the chest, the softness of the exhale. You watch as shoulders ease, as faces relax slightly. Nothing dramatic occurs, and yet something subtle shifts. The moment becomes less crowded with fear. You begin to understand that teaching does not require a platform. It happens while walking from one place to another, while washing bowls after a meal, while waiting for water to boil. You show how to pause before speaking, how to let silence settle instead of rushing to fill it. When someone shares a worry, you do not interrupt. You let their words finish completely, allowing the space afterward to remain open. In that pause, they often continue on their own, hearing themselves more clearly. You see how being fully listened to can ease suffering, even when circumstances remain unchanged. Children watch you closely. They notice how you kneel to meet them at eye level, how you wait for them to finish speaking without correcting or guiding. When you walk with them, you match their shorter stride, allowing them to set the pace. You point out small things along the path, the pattern of veins on a leaf, the way ants move together carrying something larger than themselves. These observations are not lessons in disguise. They are invitations to notice what is already present. The children respond easily, their attention bright and immediate. You sense how natural mindfulness is when it is not framed as something to achieve. Adults approach more cautiously. Years of worry have shaped their movements, tightened their expressions. You do not ask them to let go of their fears. You ask them to notice where those fears live in the body. Some feel it as pressure in the chest, others as heaviness in the stomach, others as restlessness in the limbs. You guide them gently to breathe into those places, not to make the feeling disappear, but to soften around it. You watch as resistance eases, as breath creates space where tension once felt solid. Peace, you are learning, often begins as permission. Your own days remain simple. You wake early, sit quietly wherever you are, feeling the ground beneath you, the sky above. The sounds of morning arrive gradually, birds testing their voices, distant footsteps, the first stirrings of daily life. You carry this calm into everything that follows. When challenges arise, you notice how your body responds before your thoughts do. Tightness, warmth, quickened breath. You meet these sensations with the same care you offer others. Teaching peace outwardly requires that you continue to practice it inwardly, moment by moment. There are times when the weight of the world presses closer, when news arrives that unsettles even your steady breath. In these moments, you do not retreat from others. You sit with them, acknowledging the difficulty without amplifying it. You suggest walking together slowly, feeling each step. You suggest eating mindfully, tasting each bite fully. These small acts do not solve larger problems, but they anchor people in the present, where they can find enough steadiness to continue. You see how peace is not something distant or abstract. It is built quietly through repeated, ordinary actions. As you move from place to place, your reputation grows, though you pay little attention to it. People speak of the calm they feel around you, of the way time seems to slow in your presence. You accept this without attachment, understanding that what they respond to is not you as an individual, but the quality of attention you carry. You continue walking, breathing, listening. In unsettled times, these small acts become offerings, steady and unassuming. You do not seek to change the world all at once. You remain present where you are, trusting that peace, practiced gently, has a way of spreading on its own. The quiet way you move through the world begins to leave traces that remain even after you have gone. Not marks carved into stone or names recorded with ceremony, but impressions carried gently in memory. Someone recalls how you listened without interrupting. Another remembers the calm of walking beside you along a dusty path. These recollections travel farther than you ever intend, passing from one conversation to the next, softening voices as they go. You continue on your way, unaware of how often your presence is mentioned after the dusk, when people sit together and speak in low tones about what steadied them during the day. You begin to write, not out of ambition, but out of the same attentiveness that guides your walking and breathing. Ink meets paper slowly, guided by a hand that has learned patience through repetition. You write in the early hours when the world feels suspended between rest and movement. Light is dim, just enough to see the page, just enough to keep words from rushing. Each sentence forms carefully, shaped by breath rather than urgency. You pause often, letting silence gather between lines. Writing feels less like producing something and more like listening for what wishes to be said. The pages fill gradually. There is no sense of completion, no urgency to share what you have written. When someone asks to read, you offer the pages without ceremony. They are passed hand to hand, folded and unfolded, sometimes copied by others who take the time to trace each word carefully. Ink stains their fingers just as it stains yours. The teachings do not arrive as declarations. They arrive as invitations to pause, to notice, to return to the present moment. Readers linger over certain lines, letting them settle before moving on. You imagine them sitting quietly, perhaps by lamplight, perhaps outdoors at dusk, reading slowly, breathing in rhythm with the words. conversations begin to carry fragments of what you have written. Phrases surface gently, woven into everyday speech. Someone reminds another to breathe before responding. Someone else suggests walking more slowly, noticing each step. These ideas are not attributed to you with any consistency. Often, they are simply shared as something that feels true. You sense that this is how the teachings are meant to travel, unclaimed, adaptable, shaped by the lives they enter. You feel no need to track their path. Like breath, they move where they are needed. As letters arrive from distant places, you notice how far these quiet words have gone. The handwriting changes from letter to letter. The paper bears different textures and scents, but the tone remains similar. People write of finding small moments of peace amid difficulty, of discovering steadiness in simple practices. You read these letters slowly, holding each one with care. Gratitude arises, not as pride, but as a gentle warmth. You respond when it feels appropriate, your replies brief and unadorned, offering reassurance without instruction. You trust that what is essential will be understood without being explained fully. Teaching begins to take shape in gatherings that form naturally. People sit together, sometimes in temples, sometimes beneath trees, sometimes in modest rooms lit by a single lamp. You speak quietly, allowing pauses to stretch comfortably. You notice how people lean in, not out of effort, but because the atmosphere invites listening. Words are spoken plainly, grounded in everyday experience. You talk about breathing while washing hands, about walking while aware of the contact between foot and earth, about listening without preparing a response. These teachings do not overwhelm. They settle gently, like dust returning to the ground. You remain attentive to your own inner landscape as your words travel farther than your footsteps. There are moments when the attention of others feels heavy, when expectations brush against you unexpectedly. In these moments, you return to the practices that have always guided you. You sit quietly, feeling the support of the ground beneath you, the steady movement of breath. You remind yourself that the teachings are not yours to control. They are expressions of something larger, something that flows through you rather than from you. This understanding keeps you grounded, preventing the spread of words from disturbing the calm that gave rise to them. As time passes, you notice that your writing changes subtly. Early pages focus closely on practice, on the immediate experience of breath and body. Later, words begin to reflect a wider view, shaped by encounters with suffering and resilience. Yet the tone remains consistent, gentle, and unhurried. You do not raise your voice on the page. You trust the reader to meet you where you are, to read slowly, to pause when needed. The absence of urgency becomes a kind of guidance in itself. At night, when you rest, you think briefly of the many hands holding your words, of conversations unfolding beyond your sight. This thought does not keep you awake. It settles into the background of your awareness, like the sound of insects beyond the window. You breathe, feeling the familiar rhythm that has accompanied you from the beginning. Words may travel far, but they always return to silence. In that silence, you rest, knowing that what truly matters cannot be hurried, cannot be forced, and does not need to be loud to be heard. Distance arrives quietly, without the drama you might have expected. One day, the land beneath your feet no longer carries the same sense, the same cadence of sound, the same familiar patterns of light and shadow. The air feels different as it enters your lungs, cooler or drier, carrying traces of places you have never walked before. You notice this first, not with thought, but with the body. The way your shoulders lift slightly when you wake, the way your breath pauses for a fraction of a moment before settling again. You are far from home now, though the word itself feels strangely imprecise. Home, you are beginning to understand, is no longer a single place you can point to on a map. You move through streets shaped by unfamiliar histories. Buildings rise in angles and materials your eyes are not used to resting on. Voices carry accents that bend words differently, stretching sounds into new shapes. You listen carefully, not to understand everything, but to remain present. At times, memory presses in gently, like a hand resting on your back. A certain quality of light reminds you of mornings long ago. The smell of cooking drifting from an open window stirs something quiet inside you. These moments do not overwhelm. They ache softly, like muscles remembering a familiar movement. You allow the feeling to be there without grasping it. The ache becomes another sensation to breathe with. You carry your past not as a burden, but as a texture within you. When you sit, images arise without invitation. Temple courtyards warmed by sun, bells echoing through trees, paths dusted with fallen leaves. They appear briefly, then fade, leaving behind a sense of continuity rather than loss. You learn that memory does not demand return. It only asks to be acknowledged. In this way, distance teaches you something subtle. Separation does not break connection. It changes its form. Daily life reshapes itself again. You wake in unfamiliar rooms, light entering through windows that frame skies different from the ones you grew up under. You sit quietly before the day begins, feeling the ground support you just as it always has. The earth here may be named differently, but its firmness is the same. You breathe, noticing that breath does not carry a passport. It moves freely, indifferent to borders. This realization settles deeply, offering comfort when the mind wanders toward questions of belonging. People approach you cautiously at first, curious but uncertain. You do not try to explain yourself fully. You let your presence speak in the way it always has, through attention, through patience. Conversations unfold slowly. You listen to stories shaped by different landscapes and concerns. Though the details vary, the underlying tones feel familiar. Fear, hope, longing, resilience. These are shared languages, spoken everywhere. You respond, not by aligning yourself with place or identity, but by meeting each person where they are, moment by moment. At times, the weight of distance grows heavier. News arrives from far away, carrying echoes of struggle, of suffering you cannot directly touch. You feel this weight in the chest, a tightening that asks to be noticed. You sit with it, breathing gently, allowing space around the feeling. You do not push it away. You do not let it consume you. You recognize that caring deeply does not require proximity. Compassion travels without needing to follow roads. Writing becomes a refuge during these periods. You sit with pen and paper, letting words form slowly. They do not seek to bridge distance or erase it. They simply give shape to what is present. Ink flows, pauses, resumes. The page receives everything without judgment. When you finish, you feel no urgency to send these words anywhere. Their purpose is already fulfilled in the act of being written. Distance, you realize, has sharpened your listening. Removed from familiar surroundings, attention turns inward more naturally. As seasons change, you notice how the body adapts. Muscles learn new patterns of movement. Ears attune to different rhythms of sound. The initial sense of dislocation softens. You begin to feel at ease, not because the place has become familiar, but because you have learned how to rest within unfamiliarity itself. Belonging, you discover, does not require recognition. It arises from presence. Wherever you are fully present, you belong. At night, when the world grows quiet, you lie down and feel the steady rhythm of breath continue. The ache of distance lingers faintly, no longer sharp, more like a quiet companion. It reminds you of the many places you have been shaped by, the many people you carry within you. You do not try to resolve this feeling. You let it exist alongside gratitude for where you are now. Sleep comes gently, crossing distances the body no longer measures. In rest, there is no here or there. There is only this moment held softly, wide enough to include every place you have ever called home. Over time, the sense of distance softens into something workable. Like clay warmed by steady hands, you begin to notice places where stillness gathers naturally, tucked away from the louder currents of the world. They are not chosen for beauty or significance, but for their quiet reliability. A stretch of land bordered by trees, a few buildings simple enough to disappear into their surroundings. You arrive without expectation, carrying little more than what you need. The air feels open here, receptive. When you stand still, you sense how easily breath settles, how the body relaxes without instruction. This becomes enough to begin. Days take shape through small agreements rather than rules. People arrive gradually, drawn by word of mouth, by the feeling that something gentle is happening here. You do not greet them with explanations. You greet them with presence. Together, you begin to shape a rhythm that does not demand attention, yet holds it. A bell marks the morning. Its sound clear but unhurried, drifting across fields and through trees. People rise quietly, folding blankets, opening doors, stepping into the day without rushing ahead of it. The bell does not command, it reminds. Meals become anchors. Food is prepared simply, shared without conversation at first. Bowls are held carefully, set down quietly. The warmth of rice, the texture of vegetables, the sound of chewing all become part of the practice. Eating slows everyone down. You notice how quickly tension dissolves when the body is nourished with care. Afterward, dishes are washed together. Hands move through water. Soap bubbles rise and burst. Laughter sometimes appears briefly then fades back into quiet. Nothing needs to be sustained artificially. The routine holds itself. Silence becomes a shared language. It is not enforced, only invited. People learn quickly that silence here is not empty. It is spacious. In it, thoughts are allowed to surface and pass without being chased. You sit together often, sometimes indoors, sometimes beneath open sky. The ground supports you all equally. You feel the subtle shift when many people breathe together, the way the space seems to deepen. No one is trying to achieve anything. The sitting feels like resting inside the day rather than stepping out of it. Work unfolds naturally within this frame. Gardens are tended, paths swept, buildings repaired as needed. Tasks are assigned lightly, often taken up without being asked. You notice how routine transforms effort into ease. When the same actions repeat each day, they lose their sharp edges. Weeding becomes a meditation in bending and straightening. Chopping vegetables becomes a lesson in rhythm. Even fatigue is met differently, acknowledged without complaint, allowed to soften through rest rather than resistance. You move among the community quietly, attentive to small imbalances. When tension arises, you do not address it directly at first. You adjust the rhythm instead. A longer pause between activities, an extra sitting period, a reminder to breathe before speaking. Often, this is enough. You see how much conflict dissolves when people are given space to return to themselves. Words are used sparingly, offered when they can be received without defensiveness. The atmosphere teaches more than instruction ever could. Evenings arrive gently, light fades without drama, shadows lengthen, and the bell sounds again, slower now, deeper. People gather for a final sitting. The day settles into the body, its impressions loosening one by one. You feel gratitude move through you quietly, not attached to outcomes or recognition, simply for the fact that this moment exists. Afterward, people drift to rest, footsteps soft on the ground, doors closing without sound. Night holds the place carefully. Over weeks and months, the refuge becomes self-sustaining. New arrivals sense the rhythm almost immediately. They fall into step without needing guidance. You realize that what you have helped shape is not dependent on your constant presence. The structure is simple enough to be remembered, flexible enough to adapt. This realization brings a quiet relief. Refuge, you understand, is not something you provide. It is something that emerges when conditions are right. When you sit alone now, listening to the familiar sounds of the place you have helped shape, you feel no sense of ownership, only connection. Bells, meals, shared silence. These elements weave together into a life that does not demand explanation. You breathe, feeling how routine itself can be an act of care. In these quiet places, refuge is built day by day, not as escape from the world, but as a way of meeting it gently, steadily, without fear. The land you now move through does not ask much of you. It offers itself plainly, without ornament, and in doing so invites your attention more fully than grand surroundings ever could. Rows of plum trees stretch gently across the orchard, their branches low and patient, shaped over time by seasons rather than design. Gravel paths wind between them, pale stones pressed into the earth by countless careful steps. When you walk here, the sound beneath your feet is soft and steady, a muted crunch that rises and fades with each movement. You do not hurry. There is nowhere to arrive. Walking itself has become the purpose, each step an opportunity to rest inside the present moment. You begin your mornings on these paths, often before the light has fully settled. Mist clings lightly to the orchard, catching on leaves and fruit, gathering in the low spaces between trees. The air smells faintly sweet and green, carrying the promise of ripening plums later in the year. You step forward slowly, feeling how the body naturally finds balance when not rushed. Heel touches ground, weight shifts, toes release. Breath moves in rhythm with motion, not forced, not counted, simply noticed. With each step, the ground becomes familiar in a deeper way. Ordinary earth transforms, not because it changes, but because you meet it with awareness. The plum trees stand quietly as witnesses. You notice how little they demand. They grow, they bear fruit, they shed leaves, they rest. No effort is wasted. When blossoms appear, they do so without announcement, pale against the dark branches. When fruit forms, it ripens gradually, responding to sun and rain without impatience. You walk among them and feel your own pace adjusting, slowing to match theirs. The mind, once so eager to move ahead, begins to settle into the same patient rhythm. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer pull you forward. They drift alongside, then fall away like petals returning to the ground. Others walk these paths with you. Sometimes you move together in silence, a line of figures spaced comfortably apart, each person attentive to their own steps, while remaining aware of the presence around them. No one leads, no one follows. The path holds everyone equally. You sense how shared silence deepens when movement is slow, how the space between people becomes something felt rather than measured. Occasionally, someone pauses, drawn by a sound or a change in light. Others continue, unbothered. There is no need for uniformity. Walking meditation here allows for difference without disturbance. As the day unfolds, the orchard changes subtly. Light shifts through the leaves, creating patterns that move across the path. Birds settle and lift again, their calls brief and uninsistent. You notice how sound travels differently here, softened by foliage, absorbed by open space. Even the gravel seems to listen, responding to each footstep with a quiet acknowledgement. You realize that walking has become a form of dialogue, a conversation between body and land. Each step receives a response. Each pause is met with stillness. In the afternoon, warmth settles more fully, and the orchard grows drowsy. You walk again, feeling the heat rise from the ground. The air thickens slightly around you. Sweat forms, cools, evaporates. Sensation flows without resistance. There is no separation between practice and daily life. Walking to fetch water, walking to sit, walking simply because the body wishes to move. All feel the same. The distinction between sacred and ordinary dissolves quietly. The path does not need to be named holy. Attention is what makes it so. When evening approaches, The orchard exhales. Light softens, shadows lengthen, and the gravel path grows quieter as footsteps fade. You take one last slow walk, feeling the day settle into your bones. Plum trees stand dark against the dimming sky, their presence steady and unassuming. You stop briefly, not to mark the moment, but because stopping feels natural. Breath moves easily. The ground supports you. In this simple place, among trees and stones, life slows to its own true pace. Walking has taught you again what sitting once revealed, that every place can become a refuge when met fully, and that even the most ordinary ground can hold something sacred when you walk upon it with care. Breath becomes the quiet center around which everything else now turns. Among the plum trees and along the simple paths, you notice how often people forget it is there. Shoulders rise without awareness, chests tighten, faces hold expression shaped by effort rather than ease. You do not point this out directly. You invite attention gently, the way one might invite someone to notice the warmth of sunlight already touching their skin. When people sit with you, you begin not with instruction, but with presence. You allow a few moments of silence to settle, letting the space itself do some of the work. Then, softly, you suggest noticing the breath exactly as it is, without shaping it, without correcting it. Air enters, air leaves. That is enough to begin. You speak slowly, leaving generous pauses between words so that breath can be felt rather than conceptualized. You describe the sensation of air at the nostrils, cool and light, then warmer as it flows out again. You encourage awareness of the belly rising slightly, the chest expanding just enough. There is no insistence on depth or rhythm. You emphasize that the breath already knows how to breathe. This reminder seems to loosen something in people. You can see it in the way their jaws soften, in the way their hands rest more easily in their laps. Peace, you suggest quietly, does not need to be imported. It is already here, moving in and out of the body all the time. As you guide others, you remain deeply attentive to your own breathing. You feel it anchor you, especially when you sense the restlessness in the group. Some minds wander quickly, pulled by worries or plans. You acknowledge this without judgment, suggesting that when attention drifts, it can return gently, the way one might return to a familiar path without frustration. You watch as people begin to understand this, not as a rule, but as a kindness they can offer themselves. The breath becomes a home they can visit again and again, no matter where they are. You begin to weave breathing into movement as well. Walking becomes an extension of this awareness, each step paired loosely with inhalation or exhalation. You show how breath and body naturally seek harmony when given space. People follow you along paths slowly, feeling the contact of foot with ground, noticing how breath adjusts without conscious control. You see how this simple coordination quiets the mind. Concerns that once felt urgent soften at the edges. The present moment grows wider, more accommodating. Over time, you notice that people begin to carry this awareness into moments you are not present for. They speak of breathing while waiting in line, while washing dishes, while listening to difficult news. They describe how returning to breath creates a small pocket of calm amid chaos. You listen to these stories with gratitude, not because they confirm your teaching, but because they show how accessible peace truly is. Breath travels everywhere the body goes. It asks nothing in return. There are moments when you guide breathing in the midst of strong emotion. Someone sits with grief heavy in their chest, or with anger vibrating through their limbs. You do not ask them to breathe these feelings away. You invite them to breathe with them, to notice where the sensation lives, how it shifts when met with attention. You speak gently, reminding them that breath can hold pain without being damaged by it. You watch as tears fall, as tension eases slightly, as space opens around what once felt overwhelming. In these moments, breath becomes not just a tool, but a companion. As days pass, the practice of breathing feels less like something you teach and more like something that teaches through you. You find yourself returning to it instinctively when fatigue arises, when questions feel too large, when the world presses close. Inhale, exhale, each cycle renews a quiet trust. You see how breath connects everything, body and mind, self and surroundings, stillness and movement. It becomes clear that peace is not an achievement waiting at the end of effort. It is a quality that emerges whenever attention returns to what is already happening. In the evenings, when people sit quietly after a day of work and walking, you guide one last gentle awareness of breath. Lamps glow softly, shadows rest against walls, and the air grows cooler. You feel the shared rhythm of breathing in the room, subtle but present, like a single body made of many. Words become unnecessary. Breath continues on its own, steady and faithful. As night settles, you rest in this simplicity, knowing that wherever people go next, this quiet art will travel with them, already alive in each moment they choose to notice it. Time begins to behave differently now, no longer dividing itself into neat segments that ask to be named or counted. You notice this first in the mornings, when dawn arrives without insistence. Light gathers slowly at the edge of the sky, spreading across rooftops, fields, and paths with patient certainty. You wake before the sun fully rises, not because a bell calls you, but because your body has learned the rhythm of light and dark. Breathing quietly, you lie still for a few moments, aware of how the day enters gradually, how nothing is demanded all at once. As you step outside, the air carries the imprint of the night that has just passed. Sometimes it is cool and crisp, sometimes heavy with warmth already promised. You feel these differences immediately on your skin without needing to interpret them. The sky shifts almost imperceptibly from grey to pale gold, and shadows retreat slowly, as if reluctant to leave. You stand and watch without comment. The return of dawn no longer feels like a beginning in the way it once did. It feels like a continuation, a steady turning that does not require acknowledgement to remain faithful. Days unfold through light and shadow rather than schedules. You notice how the orchard changes its mood as the sun climbs higher, how paths brighten and then soften again as afternoon leans toward evening. Leaves respond quietly to these shifts, lifting slightly toward warmth, then settling back into themselves. You walk among them without hurry, sensing how your own pace has adapted to this gentler measure of time. When the sun is high, you rest more. When it lowers, movement feels natural again. The body listens and you follow. Seasons pass almost unnoticed at first. Then one morning, you realize that the air smells different, sharper perhaps, or sweeter. Leaves begin to change color subtly, not all at once, but tree by tree, branch by branch. Some hold their green longer than others, and you admire this quiet individuality. You rake fallen leaves without regret, knowing more will follow. Their dry sound against the ground becomes another familiar note in the ongoing song of the day. Each season brings its own textures: the brittle chill of winter mornings, the soft dampness of spring, the full-bodied heat of summer afternoons, the gentle cooling of autumn evenings. None of them announce arrival or departure. They simply arrive, then pass on. Years move through you the same way. You do not feel older so much as more spacious. Experiences layer themselves gently, without crowding. Memory becomes less about specific moments and more about qualities: warmth, patience, clarity, fatigue, renewal. You sense time passing in the way your body responds to effort, in the way rest arrives more quickly and feels more necessary. There is no struggle against this. Aging feels less like loss and more like refinement, a gradual shedding of urgency. Light continues to guide you. Midday brightness brings a clarity that sharpens attention, while evening light softens everything it touches. You notice how conversations change as shadows lengthen, how voices lower, how silences grow more comfortable. When dusk arrives, it does so with remarkable consistency, reminding you that some things remain dependable no matter how much else shifts. You sit quietly as night settles, watching the last light fade from the sky. Stars appear gradually, not demanding notice, yet always present when you take the time to look. Sleep comes differently now. It is less something you fall into, and more something you ease toward. You lie down with awareness, feeling the surface beneath you, the gentle weight of your body settling. Breath continues its steady rhythm, unchanged by the years that have passed. In the darkness, you sometimes sense the presence of all the days that have led here, not as a sequence, but as a single, continuous flow. Time feels wide, accommodating, without sharp edges to catch on. When morning returns, it does so faithfully. Dawn does not grow tired of arriving. This reliability becomes a quiet comfort. No matter what has happened the day before, light returns, offering another opportunity to be present. You greet it not with expectation, but with gratitude that does not need words. Standing in the early light, you feel how time has shaped you gently, without force. Years have passed, seasons have turned, leaves have fallen and grown again. Through it all, the simple markers remain: light, shadow, breath, awareness. These continue to guide you, steady and sufficient, as time flows on, unbroken and kind. As time smooths your edges, people begin to gather more often when you speak, though nothing about the way you speak changes. You do not project your voice or sharpen your words. You arrive quietly, sit down, and allow the room to settle around you. Chairs creak, bodies shift. The air carries a low hum of anticipation that gradually fades as people realize there is no need to prepare themselves. You wait without discomfort. The pause itself becomes the opening. Breath moves in and out, unremarked, shared. Only when the space feels ready do you begin to speak, your voice low enough that it invites listening rather than demanding it. You choose words carefully, not because they are precious, but because fewer of them allow more room. Each sentence lands gently, followed by silence that stretches comfortably. You watch faces soften as people adjust to this rhythm. At first, some lean forward, expecting more, expecting something to arrive quickly. Over time, they relax back into their seats, sensing that what matters is not coming next, but what is already present. You trust these pauses. You know that silence does much of the teaching on its own, allowing words to settle into the body rather than skimming the surface of the mind. When you speak of peace, you do not frame it as an achievement or a distant goal. You describe it as something that can be touched in simple ways. Feeling the feet on the ground, noticing breath, listening without forming a reply. You demonstrate these gestures as you speak, occasionally pausing to take a conscious breath or to feel the weight of your body against the chair. These movements are subtle, almost invisible, yet they guide attention more effectively than explanation ever could. People begin to mirror you unconsciously, shoulders lowering, breath slowing. Crowds vary from place to place. Sometimes you sit with a few people in a modest room, sometimes with many in a large hall. The scale does not change your approach. You speak as if addressing one person at a time, trusting that the same quiet presence can reach many without effort. When questions arise, you listen fully before responding, allowing the questioner to feel heard even before an answer is given. Often, your response is brief, pointing back to lived experience rather than abstract ideas. You sense how relief spreads when complexity is met with simplicity. There are moments when the weight of expectation presses against you, when people hope for certainty or reassurance you cannot provide. In these moments, you do not fill the space with words. You allow the silence to hold the uncertainty. You watch as people learn to sit with not knowing, to breathe through it rather than resolve it immediately. This too becomes part of the teaching. Silence proves capable of holding doubt without collapsing under it. Your own inner world remains your guide. As you speak, you stay aware of breath, of the sensations in your body, of the subtle movements of thought. When distraction arises, you notice it without interruption, returning gently to presence. This ongoing practice keeps your words aligned with your experience. You do not speak from memory alone, but from what is alive in you at that moment. This authenticity, though never named, is felt by those listening. After gatherings end, people often linger, reluctant to break the quiet that has formed. Conversations resume softly, voices tempered by the shared stillness. You leave without ceremony, slipping out as gently as you arrived. The teachings continue without you, carried in the way people walk more slowly, in the way they pause before responding to one another. You trust this continuation. Once spoken, words no longer belong to you. They merge with silence and find their own way. Later, when you sit alone, you reflect briefly on the day, not on how many listened or what was understood, but on whether you remained present. Satisfaction comes not from reception, but from alignment with the moment. You rest into the quiet, knowing that speaking softly does not limit reach, it deepens it. In a world accustomed to noise, the gentlest voice, paired with honest silence, travels far, touching places that louder sounds never reach. The changes arrive so quietly that, at first, you mistake them for the ordinary variations of the day. A step that once felt effortless now asks for a moment of adjustment. Rising from the floor takes a little longer. The body sends small signals, tightness in the joints, a dull ache that lingers after walking, that invite attention rather than alarm. You listen. You have learned over many years that the body speaks honestly when given space. Aging does not announce itself as an interruption. It enters gently, like evening light stretching shadows across familiar ground. You begin to move more deliberately, not because you must, but because care feels appropriate. Each motion becomes a conscious act. When you walk, you feel the ground more clearly than before, sensing its texture and firmness through the soles of your feet. Balance asks for awareness now, and you offer it willingly. This slower pace does not feel like loss. It feels like refinement. Movements that once rushed ahead now settle into a rhythm that leaves nothing behind. You discover that slowness reveals details you had not noticed when speed felt natural. Sitting brings new sensations. Knees stiffen more quickly. Hips request repositioning. You respond without frustration, adjusting posture with patience. The body no longer disappears into stillness as easily as it once did. Yet this does not disturb you. Sensation becomes another companion, another field of observation. You sit with what arises, breathing gently, allowing discomfort to exist without becoming an obstacle. This practice feels familiar. You've been learning to sit with things as they are for most of your life. Now the body offers new opportunities to deepen that understanding. Fatigue appears sooner than it used to. You feel it in the heaviness of limbs, in the soft pull toward rest that arrives earlier in the day. You do not resist it. Rest becomes something you honor rather than postpone. You lie down when the body asks, feeling the support beneath you, the relief of letting weight be fully held. Sleep arrives more easily when welcomed without judgment. Waking brings a similar gentleness. You stretch slowly, greeting the day without expectation. Memory changes shape as well. Names take longer to surface, details blur at the edges. You notice this without concern, recognizing that memory, like everything else, follows its own rhythm. What remains clear are qualities, rather than specifics. The feeling of kindness, the presence of calm, the warmth of shared silence. You trust these impressions. They guide you more reliably than precise recollection ever did. Letting go of sharp memory feels like loosening a grip that no longer serves. Teaching continues, though its form shifts. You speak less, pause more. Words emerge when they are needed and recede when they are not. People sense this change and respond intuitively. meeting you with the same patience you offer yourself. You notice how gatherings naturally shorten, how silence fills the space once occupied by explanation. This feels right. Teaching now happens as much through presence as through speech. Your way of being carries the message without effort. There are moments when limitation makes itself known more clearly. Illness passes through the body, leaving weakness in its wake. Recovery takes time. You feel vulnerability more acutely, and with it, a deepening compassion for others who live with constant limitation. You do not wish these moments away. You allow them to teach you what strength looks like when force is no longer available. Strength becomes the willingness to rest, to accept help, to acknowledge dependence without shame. As years continue to soften your edges, you find yourself letting go of roles you once held firmly. Responsibilities are shared more fully now. Others step forward naturally, carrying what you once carried alone. You watch this without regret. Trust replaces control. The work continues without you at its center, and this brings a quiet relief. Letting go feels less like stepping aside and more like making room. In the evenings, you sit quietly, feeling the accumulated weight of a long life settle gently into the body. Breath moves steadily, unchanged by age. Inhale, exhale. The simplicity remains. You realize that aging has not taken anything essential from you. It has stripped away what was unnecessary, leaving behind what can no longer be shaken. Resting inside limitation, you find a freedom that struggle never offered. You remain present, attentive, at ease with what is, allowing the years to pass as naturally as breath itself. The journey back does not feel like a reversal. It feels more like a gentle curve, completing itself. When you arrive on familiar soil, there is no rush of emotion, no surge of recognition that asks to be named. The ground beneath your feet feels steady in a way that your body remembers before your mind does. Its firmness carries echoes of earlier steps, lighter ones, taken long ago without awareness of where they might lead. You pause, not because you are tired, but because standing still feels appropriate here. Breath moves quietly, and with it comes a sense of arrival that needs no announcement. The air carries scents that have never fully left you. Earth after rain, leaves warming in sunlight, smoke drifting faintly from distant cooking fires. These smells do not pull you backward into memory. They settle gently around you, like dust floating down after being disturbed. Nothing clings too tightly. Everything finds its place. You notice how the body relaxes without instruction, how shoulders soften, how the jaw releases. Familiarity does not excite you, it steadies you. Paths appear that your feet recognize even when your eyes hesitate. The curves feel known, the slight inclines anticipated. You walk slowly, letting the body lead, trusting its quiet intelligence. Houses stand where you remember them, though weather and time have altered their surfaces. Walls bear new marks, roofs have shifted slightly, yet the spaces between them feel unchanged. People move through these spaces with the same unhurried practicality you recall. Greetings are exchanged simply. There is no need to explain where you have been or what you have done. Presence speaks sufficiently. When you sit, it is often outdoors, where light and shadow continue their patient exchange across the ground. You watch how the day unfolds here, much as it always has. Morning arrives softly, midday brightens, and then eases. Evening settles without drama. The rhythm does not ask anything of you. It carries you as it always has. You feel gratitude for this continuity, not as emotion, but as a quiet recognition that something essential remains intact. Memories arise naturally, unforced. A courtyard from childhood surfaces briefly, its packed earth cool beneath bare feet. The sound of insects at dusk hums faintly in the background of your awareness. The echo of a bell rings once, then fades. These images do not demand attention. They drift through like passing clouds, leaving the sky unchanged. You do not follow them. You let them come and go, appreciating their softness. Nothing needs to be held on to. Nothing needs to be resolved. People sometimes sit with you in silence, drawn by something they cannot name. They ask few questions. When they do speak, it is often about ordinary matters: weather, crops, the health of a neighbor. You listen fully, offering presence rather than answers. Your silence feels complete here, not like an absence, but like a shared understanding. Words would add little. You sense that this, too, is a form of teaching. Though you do not think of it that way, it is simply how things are now. Your body responds differently in this familiar place. Movements remain slow, careful, but there is an ease beneath them. The ground feels forgiving. Sitting feels supported. Even fatigue rests more gently here, as if the land itself recognizes your need for pause. You lie down when the body asks, letting the weight settle fully. Sleep arrives without effort, deep and untroubled. When you wake, light is already present, waiting patiently for your eyes to open. At times, you walk alone, letting the path guide you without destination. You notice small changes: a tree grown thicker, a stone shifted, a patch of ground worn smooth by years of footsteps. These details do not evoke nostalgia. They simply confirm continuity. Life has been happening here, quietly, steadily, whether you are present or not. This realization brings comfort rather than sadness. It reminds you that nothing essential depends on your constant attention. As days pass, the sense of explanation falls away entirely. There is nothing left to clarify. No story that needs to be told in order for things to make sense. Your life feels complete, not because it has ended, but because it has integrated itself fully. Past experiences no longer sit apart from the present. They have dissolved into it, shaping how you breathe, how you sit, how you listen. The distinction between then and now grows thin, almost transparent. In the evenings, when shadows stretch long and the air cools, you sit quietly and watch the sky change. Colors deepen, then fade. Stars appear one by one, unhurried. You feel no urge to name them. Breath continues its steady rhythm, familiar and reliable. In this stillness, returning home reveals itself not as a place you have reached, but as a way of being you have settled into completely. Memories rest like dust on well-worn surfaces, visible but undisturbing. Nothing needs to be explained anymore. You are simply here, present, at ease, held by the quiet familiarity of the ground beneath you. Days now unfold with very little distinction between what might once have been called teaching and what is simply living. You wake when the light has already begun its quiet work, filtering gently through leaves or resting against familiar walls. There is no impulse to rise quickly. The body takes its time, stretching slowly, acknowledging stiffness without complaint. Breath arrives first, as it always has, steady and patient. You notice it without naming it, without guiding it. It moves on its own, and that is enough. When you finally sit up, the room feels complete as it is. Nothing calls for improvement. Nothing waits to be corrected. People still come, though fewer words pass between you now. They sit nearby, sometimes on the ground, sometimes on a bench worn smooth by years of use. They do not always ask questions. Often they simply remain, sharing the quiet. You sense their attention shifting as the moments pass, their breathing slowing to match the calm of the space. You do not feel responsible for this change. You are not directing it. Presence itself seems to do the work. When someone does speak, you listen fully, but your responses are brief. Sometimes no more than a nod or a gentle smile. Silence follows naturally, not awkward or unfinished, but settled. Your days are shaped by rest more than effort. You walk only as far as the body comfortably allows, stopping when stopping feels right. You sit often, not in formal posture, but wherever the ground feels supportive. Hands rest loosely in your lap. Eyes remain open or close briefly, depending on the light. Observation happens without intention. You notice the way shadows move across the floor, how dust floats slowly in the air before settling again. These small movements feel complete, worthy of attention without being elevated into meaning. Gratitude appears quietly, without ceremony. It does not attach itself to particular events or achievements. It arises as a gentle warmth, a sense of sufficiency. You feel it when drinking water, when the cup meets your lips and coolness spreads through the body. You feel it when listening to birds in the early morning, their calls brief and uninsistent. You feel it when night arrives and the world softens, allowing rest to come easily. This gratitude does not seek expression. It remains internal, steady, content to be felt rather than shared. Teaching now happens almost entirely without words. Others observe how you move, how you pause before standing, how you rest when fatigue arrives instead of pushing through it. They notice how you listen without interruption, how you allow silence to complete conversations rather than rushing to fill it. These observations settle into them quietly. You do not see this as instruction. It is simply the natural consequence of living attentively. Your presence offers permission more than guidance, permission to slow down, to rest, to stop striving for clarity and allow it to emerge on its own. Memory feels different now. It no longer surfaces as a sequence of events, but as a texture that underlies everything. The past is present as tone rather than story, as ease rather than detail. You do not revisit old experiences intentionally. When they arise, they do so lightly, without demand. A face appears briefly, then fades. A place surfaces, then dissolves back into the moment. Nothing insists on being held. Letting go has become so natural that it no longer feels like an action. It is simply how awareness functions when not constrained. As evening approaches, you often sit quietly and watch the light change. The sky dims gradually, colors deepening before disappearing. You notice how the body responds to this shift, how muscles soften, how breath grows slower without being asked to. There is no reflection on the day as a whole, no assessment of how time was spent. Each moment has already been complete in itself. Night arrives, not as an ending, but as another form of rest. When sleep comes, it does so gently. You lie down with awareness of the surface beneath you, the weight of the body settling naturally. Breath continues its steady rhythm, untroubled, unchanged. There is no sense of preparing for anything beyond this moment. Teaching has dissolved entirely into being. Presence remains, quiet and sufficient. In this simplicity, life continues to unfold without instruction, guided only by attention, rest, and a gratitude that no longer needs words. The rhythm that has carried you for so long remains, even as effort falls away. Nothing announces this release. It happens gradually, like a hand loosening its grip without needing permission. You wake and notice that the day does not ask you to meet it halfway. Light arrives on its own, touching the edges of the room, settling on familiar surfaces. Breath is already there, moving quietly, faithful and unremarkable. You rest inside it without directing anything, without checking whether it is deep enough or slow enough. It continues because it knows how. This is enough. You sit when sitting feels natural, and when standing requires too much, you remain where you are. The body has become a gentle guide rather than something to instruct. Sensations arise and pass with less commentary now. A dull ache appears, then softens. Warmth spreads, then recedes. You notice these changes the way you notice clouds moving across a wide sky, without urgency, without concern. Awareness holds them easily. The edges of experience feel rounded, smoothed by time and attention. Outside, the world continues its quiet work. Leaves fall and gather where they will, then are moved again by wind or rain. Birds arrive and depart without ceremony. The sky performs its slow transitions, light thinning into dusk, darkness lifting again into morning. You do not follow these movements with thought. You feel them instead, the way temperature shifts against your skin, the way sound travels differently at night. These changes no longer suggest beginnings or endings. They suggest continuity, a steady unfolding that does not require naming. People come and go gently, their presence felt more than marked. Some sit nearby for a while, sharing the stillness without expectation. Others pass through briefly, offering a glance, a small bow, a quiet acknowledgement. You receive each encounter without holding on to it. There is no sense of responsibility attached to these moments now. Presence is offered freely, without calculation. When words arise, they are simple and unforced. When silence follows, it feels complete. Memory has loosened its hold entirely. The past does not pull you backward, and the future no longer leans in with questions. What remains is a spacious awareness in which everything appears and disappears naturally. Thoughts drift through occasionally, light and insubstantial. You notice them and let them go, the way you have always done, only now with even less effort. Attention rests where it is, without needing a focal point. This rest feels stable, trustworthy. Breath continues its quiet cycle. Inhale brings coolness, a subtle expansion. Exhale releases warmth, a gentle settling. You do not accompany it with instruction or intention. It moves like water finding its level. Sometimes you notice the slight pause between breaths, a moment where nothing seems to happen. That pause feels wide, accommodating. It holds no anxiety. It simply exists, complete in itself. Then breath returns again, without being called. The body grows lighter in your awareness, as if its boundaries have softened. You feel less located inside it and more at ease within the space around it. Sounds pass through without resistance. Light touches and moves on. Even discomfort, when it appears, no longer insists on attention. It is noticed, held briefly, then allowed to change. You do not measure how long this takes. Time has lost its grip here. Moments do not stack or accumulate. Each one stands alone, sufficient. As rest deepens, you sense how little has ever been required. Effort, striving, explanation, all of these have gradually fallen away, not through rejection, but through irrelevance. What remains is simple awareness, open and receptive. You do not feel diminished by this simplicity. You feel complete. There is nothing missing, nothing to be added. The moment holds everything it needs. When sleep approaches, it does not arrive as something separate from wakefulness. The transition is smooth, almost unnoticed. You lie down or remain seated, whichever feels natural, and awareness softens without disappearing. Breath continues, steady and quiet. The body rests, supported fully. Thoughts fade into the background, then dissolve entirely. There is no concern about holding on or letting go. Both have lost their meaning here. Even in rest, something remains awake, not alert in the way it once was, but gently present. This presence does not observe from a distance. It is woven into everything. You sense how nothing truly ends, how forms change without being lost. Breath returns to air. Sound returns to silence. Light returns to darkness and then emerges again. This understanding does not arrive as a thought. It is felt as ease, as trust. In this final settling, there is no finality. The flow continues without you needing to accompany it. You rest fully inside the moment, supported by everything that has always been supporting you. Breath moves. Awareness remains. The world carries on its quiet turning. Nothing ends. Everything changes form, and in that gentle change, there is peace. Now there is nothing left to follow, nothing left to learn, and nothing left to carry forward. The story does not close with an ending, but with a soft settling, like dust returning gently to the ground after being lifted by a passing breeze. You remain exactly where you are, breathing as you have been breathing all along, without effort, without direction. The life you have moved through has not led you somewhere else. It has only brought you more fully here. As you rest in this moment, you may notice how quiet feels different now. Not empty, not waiting, but complete. Breath continues to move through you, steady and unremarkable, asking nothing in return. Each inhale arrives on its own. Each exhale releases itself naturally. There is no need to watch it closely anymore. It knows how to continue without your attention. The world does not pause and it does not hurry. Somewhere, leaves are still falling. Somewhere, light is thinning into night. Somewhere else, morning is already beginning again. None of this requires your participation. You are allowed to rest while it continues. You're allowed to let go of the idea that anything must be held together by effort. If sleep comes now, it comes as part of this same gentle rhythm. If wakefulness lingers a little longer, that too belongs. Nothing is out of place. Nothing has gone wrong. Awareness remains soft and open, like a wide sky that does not need to follow the movement of clouds to remain vast. The life you have just lived was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering how to stay, how to remain present as things change, how to meet each moment without resistance. That understanding does not end here. It does not need to be carried forward consciously. It will return quietly in ordinary moments, in breathing, in walking, in listening, whenever effort loosens its grip. For now, there is only rest. No lesson to recall, no meaning to extract. Just this steady continuation, this simple being. Breath moving, body supported. Awareness gently awake within rest itself. You do not need to go anywhere from here. You are already home.